This video is about the differences between plant and animal cell structure, their cell shapes, and the way that those cells reproduce. It's important to remember when comparing plant and animal cells that they are both eukaryotic, which means they're going to have certain organelles in common. So because they're both eukaryotic, they have a nucleus, they have ribosomes, they have a cell membrane, just like all cells, and then of course they have all your membrane-bound organelles, like rough and smooth endoplasmic reticulum, a Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, and a vacuole if it's large, or vesicles if they're small. Now we're going to look specifically at plant cell structure. So the things that make them unique is that outside of their cell membrane, they have a cell wall. It's rigid and it goes along the outside, and it's made of a carbohydrate called cellulose. This is going to give our plant cells structure. Next, plant cells have a large central vacuole full of water and sugars, and that combination is called cell sap. Finally, and most importantly, plant cells have chloroplasts, and chloroplasts are small organelles full of chlorophyll that allow them to do the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis, of course, being the process by which we take light energy and transform it into chemical energy in the form of glucose, which is C6H12O6. Alternately, animal cells have other specific structures that are unique to them. Instead of a large central vacuole, they have smaller vesicles that will hold carbohydrates, some proteins, some water, and things like that. So they have smaller little vesicles. Animal cells also have lysosomes, which are, again, another small little bubble kind of organelle that is full of enzymes that allows them to break down dead materials inside of them, or infectious bacteria and viruses, all kinds of things. Anything that needs to be broken down, lysosomes are going to carry the enzymes to do that. And then finally, animal cells have some structures called centrioles. And centrioles are important in animal cell reproduction. They're what's going to pull the cell apart. We'll look more about that in a second. Now, plant and animal cells come in several different shapes. Plant cell shapes there are fewer, but they're very important. So your typical plant cell is the one like we showed in the structural one that you'll find in the leaves and parts of the stem. So again, this is just your kind of basic square plant cell full of all the important eukaryotic organelles. Farther down in our plant, down at the roots, you have these cells called root hair cells, and they are long and skinny, but they have these protrusions that come off, and that's where it's going to be able to absorb water and other nutrients from the soil. Finally, plant cells also have xylem cells, and xylem are the tubes that pull water and nutrients up from the ground and into the leaves. So our xylem, these look kind of empty, and it's because they are. They used to be fully mature cells like this, but then the insides dried up and died out, leaving just sort of these straw-like structures that go down the stem of the plant. Animal cell shapes. Animals have way more cell shapes, and I only have a few here. The most basic one, and this is the one that looks a lot like the ones you see in diagrams, are skin cells. They just kind of have this sort of globular shape. Sperm cells have a totally different structure, right? They have like a little head area with all of their cell structures and a tail that's going to help them move. Another strange shaped cell are neurons, which are nerve cells, and they are long and thin and then have these fun, weird protrusions sticking off either side to carry electrical impulses through your nervous system. And another interesting shaped cell are red blood cells, and they just kind of look like belly buttons, I think. And what's unique about them, similar to xylem cells, they used to have a nucleus, but as they've matured, the nucleus goes away, and they can carry more oxygen that way. And finally, it's important to see the differences between how plant cells and animal cells reproduce. It's a lot simpler in plant cells. So again, we have our basic, like leaf-looking plant cell. It's a DNA, so these little red dots throughout are like the nucleus or DNA. So our DNA is going to replicate as our cell gets larger, and then a cell plate made of cellulose starts to form in between the two sets of DNA in the plant cell. So you can kind of see that here. And then finally, when that cell plate solidifies, you have two new plant cells that are stuck right up next to each other, divided by a wall of cellulose. On the other hand, animal cells need their particular reproductive structures in order to make new animal cells. So again, we have our basic animal cell. The DNA is going to replicate, right, because we want two cells that are exactly like the original cell. This is when our special centrioles come into play, and centrioles are these little structures that send out spindle fibers, which are almost like lassos. They send them out and it captures the DNA, and then it starts to pull the DNA to each side of the cell. So you can see centrioles have attached these fibers to the DNA, and it's pulling them to the sides, and the cell membrane is starting to pinch in the middle. All right, that's called cleavage. And then once that cleavage has finished, it's called cytokinesis. We'll talk more about that in a cell cycle video. But once it is pinched thoroughly through, you have two animal cells that are exactly like the parent cell. And those are the differences between plants and animal cells.